Markets a little bit flat at the opening. There are, of course, residual fears about exactly where the Eurozone's going right now in Greece. We'll get into that in a moment. You can see some modest gains in London, here in Paris and in Frankfurt. Worth mentioning Tesco, a bit of a bellwether, one of the big supermarkets, if not the biggest in the UK. Shares down at 10% after revealing some what they call very disappointing results over Christmas, over 1% down in terms of sales. That was, of course, a day after one of its big rivals, Sainsbury's, said it had its best Christmas ever. So I'm sure Tesco not feeling too great this morning. On the Asian markets as well, the Nikkei down, closing down around 0.8%. One or two investors there will be worried about exactly where Japan's going to get its energy from now that it's joined or appears to be showing some solidarity with that Western embargo on Iranian oil. The Hang Seng, I can tell you as well, has closed just before we got on air, 0.3% down as well.
Now, there are growing concerns about Greece getting that vital second bailout.
Yeah, lots of concerns, really, particularly among hedge funds. Just to recap, remember, Greece needs a second bailout of up to 130 billion euros. Now, remember, banks before Christmas had agreed to write off around half their investment. If we look at our table of exactly who's got all the debt on Greece, you can see banks have around 200 billion euros. They've agreed to lose half of that to give Greece a little breathing room. Remember, the EU and the IMF between them have around 80 billion euros or so, and that leaves around 80 billion euros among hedge funds, and it's hedge funds, insurers, sovereign wealth funds as well, who are a little bit less transparent with their funds. They're the ones causing big concern right now, because if they don't write off some of their investments, then you can pretty much kiss goodbye to any chances of a successful bailout. A little earlier on the show, we spoke to David Riley, who's the head of the sovereign debt group at Fitch Ratings, and he spelled out to us exactly the end game scenario should the Greek bailout not have any significant private sector involvement. Here's David Riley.
They have a large debt repayment on the 20th of March of around about 14 billion euros. Without reaching agreement with its private creditors on restructuring and writing down some of its debt, and then getting new funds from the IMF and EU, then we are going to have a disorderly default event.
So some tough negotiations ahead for Greece, but at least Italy's getting a few plaudits. New Prime Minister Mario Monti has paid his first official state visit to Germany, effectively checking in with the Eurozone's boss on his country's financial affairs. There were plenty of positive endorsements about the newfound pace of its austerity programme, but as Jade Barker reports, Italy is still driving much of the fear engulfing the markets.
It was words of praise Italy had been craving. On Wednesday, German Chancellor Angela Merkel assured new Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti his tough austerity measures would be rewarded.
I think that both the substance of these reforms and the fact that they were put in place quickly will strengthen Italy and improve economic prospects.
It was precisely what Monti had been hoping for ahead of his trip to Berlin. He even went on the offensive on Tuesday, telling a German newspaper that unless Italy's austerity efforts were recognised, there would be possible mass protests. In the 2 months he's been in power, Monti has imposed tough austerity measures to try to save 33 billion euros. The Rome's technocrat leader has warned it will take time for reforms to translate into economic growth. And time is something Italy is running out of. This year, over 300 billion euros in sovereign bonds will mature and have to be repaid. The austerity measures have also done little to relieve the doubts of borrowers, who continue to demand around 7% interest for Italian bonds, the mark at which Greece and Ireland had to ask for bailouts.
The Italians and I hope that there will be a reduction of interest rates in the financial markets before we can even see major changes and progress in Italy.
Monti will meet with his German and French counterparts again on January 20th, before a European summit at the end of the month.
OK, let's get a bit more of the day's, a few more even, of the day's business headlines for you now. Japan has announced it's reducing its Iranian oil imports to show solidarity with the West's embargo. The decision was made following lobbying by US Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, who was stepping up pressure on Tehran over its disputed nuclear weapons program. But Washington has been less successful with Iran's biggest oil customer, China. Its government, in fact, has refused to join any embargo.
Philip Hildebrand will receive his salary for the next year despite resigning as Swiss National Bank chairman. That's according to reports. Hildebrand quit earlier this week after revelations that his wife made huge profits trading the Swiss franc and US dollar after he capped its value last summer. Swiss news agency SDA says Hildebrand earned 862,000 Swiss francs in 2010, making him the world's highest paid central banker.
And Fiat chief executive Sergio Marchionne has fueled further speculation that he's looking for a new merger. Speaking at the Detroit Auto Show, Marchionne said consolidation among European car makers is unavoidable if they're going to beat overcapacity and financial losses. Marchionne, who's boosted Fiat's US presence through its tie-up with Chrysler, said small ain't beautiful in this business, especially when you're in the mass market. Now, I wonder whether Sergio Marchionne should be over in Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show, because he's obviously thinking big, and so are TV manufacturers right now. In fact, that's the message from many of them at this year's Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. That's despite the fact that sales of TVs, particularly high definition, and indeed the newcomers 3D, did very poorly during 2011. So the question is, does television, indeed big TVs and 3Ds, have a bright future? Well, our Tech24 editor, Rebecca Bowering, is at the CES in Las Vegas. She sent us this report.
At CES, the choice of television sets is dizzying. Whether voice recognition, HD or touchscreen, TV makers hunt for the next killer feature. Despite the rise in streaming content on tablets, they reckon TV is still a safe bet. At 55 or 60 inches, size matters. So does colour. Thin, power-efficient, ultra-sharp, OLED screens are set to replace plasma. The push on 3D continues, though uptake has been slow.
3D TV is going to be huge. The industry is not backing away from it, even though it's expensive and there's very little broadcast content. The industry is convinced that this is going to work.
The medium is also going social. Google's relaunching Smart TV, partnered by big brands.
This works as an aggregator of content, so all on the same screen, as well as watching movies and TV. You can also access the internet, you can go to YouTube, you can write on Facebook about what you've been watching. It's all integrated. It's controlled using one of these magic remotes, which has a keyboard on this side and also contains a motion sensor, or you can use your smartphone by downloading an app.
So do consumers really want all this functionality? Some analysts suspect high-end TV sets could be a hard sell.
TV manufacturers are going to have to work hard to be aggressive with their pricing while they convince consumers that they need all these premium features that they can make more money on.
Much of this technology is still years away from our front rooms, but TV makers are doing all they can to keep us switched on.
As long as we have walls, we're going to have these things.
Our producers just said that those TVs are far too big for his apartment. They are large. I'm a bit worried about high definition because you can see all my wrinkles and the bags under my eyes, I think, like close up.
And most people in Paris don't have much room, do they? They don't really have space for such big TVs. Thanks very much for that, Owen. That look at the day's business news. That's it for now. Do stay tuned to France 24. You'll be getting all the latest headlines in just a few minutes.